Thank you for joining me. We find ourselves at the most bogus of times, and just when we find ourselves near the end, around 7:17 p.m., we're given a new Bill and Ted movie. Is it righteous and true, or does it feel like they didn't quite do enough work over the past 29 years? This is my review of Bill and Ted's Face the Music. After 30 years, Bill and Ted are finally tasked with the moment that they've been waiting for since the beginning of the very first movie, where their song is going to unite the world and keep the space-time continuum from ripping apart and save all humanity. Leading up to this moment, though, the princesses have brought Bill and Ted to couples therapy, and there's some concern that they might be on the road towards divorce and losing their children, Billy and Thea. So in order to finish their song before 7:17 p.m. when the world ends, they travel forward, like years at a time, to visit with older versions of themselves and steal the song that they are going to write and make it easier for themselves. Meanwhile, the daughters, Billy and Thea, are going back with Kelly, Rufus's daughter, and trying to put together an all-star band to help their fathers at the moment when this all comes down. And concurrently, the princesses are going throughout time too and just seeing what awful losers Bill and Ted have become. So from my perspective, I don't think I ever saw these Bill and Ted movies. I was too young for when they first came out, but I'm pretty sure I saw them on some combination of like home video or cable or something like that growing up. And I can't tell you for sure that I saw these movies in order or that I saw them like in completion or anything like that. But to the best of my ability, I'm fairly aware of Bill and Ted, and I thought it would be a nice movie to watch with a couple righteous dudes. There's a line that Kevin Smith had that stuck with me all these years, which is, no matter what movie, people like make fun of like Battlefield Earth and other objectively terrible movies, and that somewhere in the world, though, there is a person whose favorite movie is Battlefield Earth. I'm sure out there in the world there are people whose favorite characters are Bill and Ted. I'm sure that there are enough people who really enjoy Bill and Ted that this movie is not really going to take a bath that badly. And I'll say this, for people who are really big Bill and Ted fans, this is a worthy watch. Kind of like how I discussed with the aforementioned Kevin Smith with his most recent release of Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which I reviewed here just recently. If you're really big into the characters, if you're really big into the universe, if you've been following these guys since the beginning, if you watch the cartoon, if you watch the TV sitcom, I don't know how you possibly would, but if you did, then you were going to like this movie. There's not really much reason for you to decide whether or not you're going to enjoy it based off of my opinion. If you really don't like Bill and Ted, if you are not a fan at all, I appreciate you watching this video even though you don't like it, but I can't imagine that this movie is going to be for you. If you're like me, though, you're kind of on the line, you're familiar with Bill and Ted, you've watched the movies before, but you don't necessarily know whether or not this is worth the investment, stick around. I'm going to go through some of my thoughts real quick. So first thought, it was really nice having Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves back reprising these characters. And one of the things I find most fascinating about this whole thing is just sort of how the conversation has changed on Keanu and Alex Winter since the very first Bill and Ted movie. So, I mean, like, now we think of Keanu as, like, the biggest star in the world and a big, huge action star, and John Wick and The Matrix and Speed and Point Break and all these things that have happened since Bill and Ted started. But Bill and Ted was his first really big role. And there was a worry after the first Bill and Ted movie that he was just this one-note stoner type character, and that he wouldn't really have that long of a career. And, you know, while Alex Winter wasn't being praised as like the next great actor of our generation, there was, you know, some reasonable suspicion that he might be a star in the making. But, you know, as soon as Bogus Journey happened, and then Keanu just started taking off, Point Break, Speed, so on and so forth, it became kind of a joke to talk about Keanu and Alex Winter and how one of them went on to be a big, humongous star and how the other one just sort of fell off.
I mean, that's exactly what you said at the Bill and Ted premiere when Terrence said, "I'll take Keanu, you take the other guy."
I never thought this was particularly fair, though, because Alex Winter really focused himself more on directing, and he has been a fantastic documentary director over the last decade or so. I mean, I remember I first saw Downloaded, which made me go like, oh, hey, Alex Winter is doing this now. And most recently, I did a review of Showbiz Kids, if you want to check that out as well. Apparently, though, Bill and Ted is the role that neither one of them could really shake. And it brought Alex Winter out of retirement. And Keanu Reeves back to the role that first brought him onto the national spotlight. As far as performances go, I think both Keanu and Alex Winter do very good jobs. Bill and Ted are very interesting characters because while they appear to be dumb, they're surprisingly wily, and they're very with it, and it's a very awkward place to walk along as an actor, and specifically for Alex and Keanu in this movie, it's difficult because a lot of this movie they're playing against themselves, so you're not actually sort of doing the same thing you would do in a normal performance where you say something and then you wait for the response and then you act off of what you're getting. You're basically acting into the void and then returning the same thing on the other side, recorded at a later date. It's not as easy as it sounds, and they both did a very good job with this. And I mean, 20 years they've been trying to get this movie done, so I think it lives with them pretty well. The one thing, I guess, that was awkward for me in watching this is that there's a certain physicality that comes with the characters of Bill and Ted, and there are a lot of moments where the age of Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves just makes sort of these mannerisms look a little bit awkward. So specifically, I think about they sort of put their arms out there a lot, and when they're kids and they do that sort of thing, teenagers when they do that sort of thing, then it seems cool, but as you get older it just seems a little bit awkward. You don't make these kind of motions as a middle-aged person. And I mean, acting and casting choices throughout this whole movie were very good. We got some old favorites coming back, and beyond that, they also sort of set it up for a future spin-off with the daughters of Bill and Ted, Billy and Thea, who are played by Samara Weaving and Bridgette Lundy-Paine. And Samara Weaving apparently got this role because of her relation to Hugo Weaving, and Hugo Weaving being in The Matrix with Keanu, and that whole thing sort of helped get this role for her. And she's really great, and has a real Margot Robbie look going about her in this movie. It's hard to see her and not think about that a lot. And I think she was great. She did this horror movie recently that was really good that I talked about here on the channel as well, so check that out if you're interested in that. But I think her star is real bright. And Bridgette Lundy-Paine did a great job as well. My only problem there is that these characters of Billy and Thea were very almost identical to the characters that their fathers are playing, so it felt a little bit like you're just trying to repeat the performance of somebody else as opposed to make it something a little bit new and unique and different. But they both did very good jobs and admirable work in this one. And having Kristen Schaal as Rufus's daughter was a great pick as well, because I think that in a world where this movie was a humongous success, like a runaway freight train and breaking box office records and yada, yada, yada. I in my mind, I think they imagined they were going to make another Bill and Ted, and it was going to be Billy and Thea from there, and Kelly, Kristen Schaal, would just be the new Rufus, and you would have a very female-centric Bill and Ted universe to fall onto. It's a story, though, that, as far as I'm concerned, this movie just doesn't hold up. And if it weren't for the initial IP, people being able to recognize Bill and Ted, I don't imagine this movie actually gets made. Put it this way, it feels very on brand that early in the movie, Bill and Ted are put before the tribunal and they say, 7:17 p.m., that's the time where the song's got to happen. That's where you're going to unite the whole world with the song that you've written. And they both look at each other like, oh crap, we should have been spending most of the last 29 years working on this song that we knew was going to be coming, and it's the homework assignment we kept putting off, and now we're going to have to cram at the end. That sort of feels like what this movie is like in a way, because it kind of feels like it was being written to a deadline. It doesn't feel like you had 29 years since the last one to kind of ruminate on what you wanted to do. It's very... you basically know how this movie is going to end from the very beginning. It doesn't really do a lot to play with this. It doesn't really do a lot to dig deep into the idea of what it's like to be a father of daughters or having relationship problems other than just sort of like superficial acknowledgments of the fact that it's happening. I just keep thinking that if I was a writer who did something like Bill and Ted, and I think about the fact that I want to make another one, and I talk to my friends Keanu and Alex, and they want to make another one, and we can, find a director to do it, blah, 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 all this stuff. I'm making a list of things in my mind or on my phone or anywhere where it says Bill and Ted ideas. And when it comes time to write the script, to try and get it out there, to do this next step, I lean heavily on my list of many Bill and Ted ideas for which I create the screenplay that I'm going to make Bill and Ted Face the Music. And it just doesn't feel like there was 30 years worth of thought put into this movie. And the rub is that structurally, it's a very well done movie. I mean, everyone, all across departments, sound, picture, makeup, wardrobe, special effects, all these things. They're doing a very good job. These are very capable hands that this movie is in. And, it's not supposed to be like a Terrence Malick flick or, an Academy Award winner. We know what the bar is going in. But despite that, it looks very good. And it's much better level than, original Bill and Ted movies have been. But it's become easier to make a more aesthetically pleasing and good-looking film since that time. That being said, we come back to the question I asked at the beginning. And this really will decide whether or not you want to see this movie. How much do you like Bill and Ted? Are you in for the whole thing? Then see it. We're at the leaderboard now, so I'm going to, give my rating on it and stuff like that. And know that this number is basically a realization of the fact that I am a moderate to okay Bill and Ted fan. And if you are a much bigger Bill and Ted fan than me, your number is probably going to be higher on this list. If you are not a big Bill and Ted fan, or you're like, who is Bill and Ted, then your number is probably going to be lower. But use this, I guess, as a benchmark for where you might land yourself. I mean, generally speaking, this movie is worth seeing if you're a completionist about the Bill and Ted universe. And, it's fun. And, we watched it with Roberto, who had never seen any of the Bill and Ted movies, but was aware of who the characters were. And he had a good time. It's not high art, but it's a fun time to spend with some friends. Bill and Ted were never supposed to be these award-winning flicks, but it's still a little bit disappointing to make it seem like they didn't really put a whole lot of thought into what this movie was going to be for the many decades that have come before it actually being filmed and released. But if I was to give Bill and Ted Face the Music a rating, I will give this movie a 6.9. I mean, it's fine. It's fun. And I think there's a lot of good people in it, and the casting is well done. And, it's just nice to see these characters again. And if you're a super big Bill and Ted fan, I'm sure you're going to be stoked about it. For everyone further down the line, different results may vary. But that's it from me. If you want more, you can go to my website, CoryBakerFilmmaker.com, Facebook.com/CoryBakerFilm, or at LegendsCB5 on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. And I'm really trying to get more committed to making more videos here. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me while I sort of worked out some of the kinks here. And I'm looking forward to making a whole lot of videos about other parts of the filmmaking process. But I talked a lot of films in this review, so if you want to see those reviews, go check those out. And can't wait to see you next time. But if you don't mind, right now, I got to get down to San Dimas because things are about to happen.